for a little bit. And as my grandmother used to say, there's nothing wrong with a bit.
Right.
Okay.
A bit. Yeah.
Right. Over to you, Andy. I'll leave it with you.
Okay.
And I'll go, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah. So Sandöbroa is an island off Sweden that has a load of pre-Viking 4th century walled villages on, which is they're quite unique. I don't think there are anywhere else. But one of them, folklore has always said you don't go in. It's possessed. It's got ghosts. It's a terrible place, and people today don't go into it. And it turns out that there was a massacre there.
I've told you about it weeks and weeks
That's
ago.
right. Yes, it was. There was a documentary on it a while ago.
Yeah,
I watched it again the other night just because I thought, oh, I liked that one. I'll watch it again.
Yes.
But, so what they discovered was that they got what we would call a Godiva dog, but they said it's the world's first archaeology dog, but it picks up human remains. And it kept finding loads of them. Then they thought it had gone mad, and they started excavating. They started excavating to find out what this, what sort of town and what it was, because they've actually reconstructed one of these walled villages, and it seems to follow the same sort of pattern. So you've got it was kind of an oval shaped wall, maybe 4 or 5 meters high, with entrances north, south, east, west, and inside rows of longhouses, basically, or the predecessors to longhouses. So stone based with thatched roofs and all the rest of it. Clearly they needed protecting, otherwise they wouldn't need such big high walls, but whatever. And they found some remains in one of them, but they found that they were in a bit of a state. So they got this Godiva dog in and started looking around, and it picked up dozens of bodies. So they're like little white flags all over the center of this place. And they thought,
were they buried though, or were they were exposed, weren't they?
They were left where they'd been killed, and that's the thing, is they had been executed.
That's right.
And the bizarre thing is that they reckon that they got in. That somehow had got into the walled city without there's no sign of a struggle. They weren't armed. They'd all been executed from behind, most of them, and they were talking to men, women, and children. There was a 13-month-old baby that had had its head chopped off. So clearly they were wiping them out, and they thought, oh, maybe it was a robbery, but they'd found lots of very valuable gilt brooches and a load of, now, what were they? I think they were Roman coins, but they were the gold ones, which are quite rare and worth a lot of money. It was like a year's salary. They found loads of those as well.
They couldn't understand why they thought it might have been a vengeance thing.
Yeah. The only conclusion they could come to was that they had wiped these people out because they didn't like them for some reason.
Yeah.
Whether they were controlling, whether they would have been working with the Romans, because that's about the same period when the Roman Empire in the West collapsed. Whether they'd lost their support or whatever, I don't know. What it didn't, they haven't done any DNA, I don't think, yet either, which would be interesting to see whether they were people that had been working abroad, or because they thought they might be mercenaries working with the Romans. And that they were getting their own back on them for some, but I can't see why locals would get their own back on them for that. But they also wondered whether the people that were murdered were all collected together, like all the chiefs of the area together, and then maybe they wiped them all out in a kind of like what was they said, the Red Wedding in Games of Thrones, where they got all the families together and killed them all in one go, But really interesting stuff. You're thinking, oh wow, and one guy had been killed and fallen onto a fire and things like that, and they worked out exactly how they died.
And
all
of that, none of the gold had been taken. Everything.
Nope, nothing. Everything had left as it was. Nobody had gone in afterwards to bury them, so they think that the whole village had been wiped out and then left. And so the interesting though, so that's like 1600 years ago, and that folk legend is still there now, that you don't go there, you know, which I like the idea that there's still a legend there as well, you know. So, well, it's not a legend, is it? It's a real warning. Up until they started excavating was just a legend. So,
well, they say a lot of these Hans Christian Andersen stories go way back to real events, don't they?
Yeah. They're always worth listening
thousands
to.
of years ago. Yeah, I can't remember what I do remember that, but I can't remember if I read it somewhere or if it was a program that I saw.
Yeah, it was a program last year. Yeah, it was, I can't remember where I saw it. Viking Massacre, it's called, I think.
Right.
But, but yeah. No, Viking Massacre was another one. I can't remember what it was called.
Well, when you said Sandy Borg, I thought, I recognise that name. Yeah.
Fascinating story.
Gruesome.
Yeah. Because they still don't know who they are and why. And if they were, as I say, the DNA and the isotope tests should tell them whether they are all one big family or whether they are visiting people from different places.
Yeah. No clues.
No.
Where's Drina tonight, Anne?
I've no idea. I thought I'd see her here.
Perhaps she's forgotten.
Well, Carl seemed to think that she was. He was saying she couldn't get the recording, so he seemed to think that. And therefore, I would assume that she's not going to be here. Yeah, could have done.
How are you, Peter?
You're mute.
Can't hear you.
No, not too bad. Thank you very much. No.
Oh, good. You get feeling a bit better.
Well, yeah, since I came home, yeah.
Yeah.
Being home is better.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Definitely.
The 104-year-old lady I used to know died on Friday, which was a shame, but still on the ball and with it. So
she.
My next door neighbor is 101.
Yeah.
Still drives her own car.
Brilliant.
And is bright as a button.
Yeah.
This lady was just like talking to a 25-year-old. She was just so quick-witted. Yeah. So funny.
Was she
was a nurse. She was an RAF nurse during the war.
Yeah, this one was a nurse during the war as well, but I don't know whether it was RAF. She was out in the Middle East.
Right, yeah.
Was she in a nursing home or was she still at home?
She had gone into a home only briefly because she'd been ill, but I don't know whether she'd come home or not.
No,
I don't think so. I think she was still in the home.
But only has her own house next door to me.
Yeah,
and looks after herself completely.
Yeah, well, this lady didn't until about 2 months ago when she got quite ill, and they put her in a home to get better, and then they wouldn't let her out.
Ooh, I don't want to go in a home.
No,
that's one thing I don't want.
I think that's a universal.
Don't want to go in a home.
Really, nobody wants to go in a home.
No, absolutely.
When my dad was ill and taken into hospital, the doctor came over to me and my brother and started to go on about this do not resuscitate thing. And we're going, yeah, it's fine. And he goes, and he started to assume that we were arguing with him about keeping him going. And we're going, no, that's fine. We don't want him resuscitated. We would hate it. He would hate to be stuck in a hospital bed for 3 months. He likes being out and about and walking. He'd absolutely hate it. And at his age, if he'd been hospitalized, he wouldn't have got out of it. So we just said, no, forget it.
Horrible way to end your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice. Just go in your sleep. That would be nice.
Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't that be the best?
Yeah. I had a very frail great aunt up in Glasgow like that, and her stronger younger sister died before I suddenly had a heart attack, and she was on her own in this flat, thinking, oh God, what's going to happen to her? How if anything happens to her, how are we ever going to know? And she had a friend used to pop in from next door and see her, and she just didn't feel too well one night, and so they tucked her up in bed, and she just went to sleep and didn't wake up. Absolutely perfect.
Just absolutely perfect the way to go.
Yeah.
What everybody dreams of, but I'm not sure it happens to that many.
Well, my grandma, she was going out for dinner with her youngest daughter. Gran would have been in her late 80s, I guess. And so she got all dressed up, got her best party frock on, put her earrings on and a bit of lippy, and then she just dropped dead. Looking her best.
Excellent.
Again, that would be a good time to go, because she was looking forward to something, wasn't she?
She was
going out,
looking forward to a nice dinner with family.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have liked to go without her teeth in and her hair looking a mess. For sure.
No. Don't worry, Adam. You've got all this to look forward to, mate.
Oh yeah.
It starts to become more in the front of your mind as you get older.
Yeah.
Best not to think about it.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I
do,
did think about it a lot and made plans, and so I feel comforted by having made them.
Yeah.
I won't have to go into a home.
No,
unless I have a stroke first and can't handle things.
Yeah.
I'm determined not to go into home.
No.
And certainly if I have any sign of Alzheimer's, to do something about that rather than live through it. I don't want to live through that.
Yeah.
So, you know.
That's horrible.
So I did think it was worth really looking into rather than not thinking about it. Because if you don't think about it, you'd suddenly be in it.
No, there's nothing wrong with planning ahead.
Yeah.
I better go and lie down now then.
Planning ahead. Yeah.
What are you doing at the moment, Adam? Are you still at uni?
I've just finished actually.
Have you?
Ooh.
Yeah.
What are you going to do now?
Well, I've got a job. Nothing to do with history, but I'm working now. I'm working for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, so I'm just doing that. But I'm going to carry on doing. I've got my YouTube channel going. I'm just going to carry on doing that.
Good.
Keep my hand in the history stuff.
What would you really, really like to do?
That's a really good question. I couldn't answer it. I don't know. I would love to do the history stuff full time, but I don't know how. I did apply for some jobs to do with that, but they're really hard to get. You know.
Yeah.
Sort of heritage jobs and things with the government. They're really, really hard to get. But I did give it a go. I thought that would be great if I could do that full time. But yeah.
Maybe somewhere like the National Trust or English Heritage.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
They have a lot of departments and they do a bit of archiving and archaeology and yeah, they're quite a good group to work for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna keep my hand in it though. Maybe get writing as well and things like that. So I just keep myself involved with it.
Yeah. Well, Carl's written a few books, hasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got one of them. I haven't read it yet.
Have you? Which one have you got?
Yeah, Romans in South Wales.
Oh, yeah. I've got Romans in Glamorgan, I think.
Okay.
Have you got any of Carl's books, Pete?
Yes, I've got a couple of his books. Yeah.
Have you?
Got 3 of them, yeah.
Hang on a minute, Pete. You should have all 6. Right, okay. Anyway, thanks for keeping that going, guys. The lamb's okay. Thank you very much. So we're gonna. I'm just setting up the last of my setting stuff. So right. So have we done everybody's news now? So Peter, any news from you this week, darling?
No.
Pete, why not? There's all you know. You used to be.
I haven't been anywhere.
Yeah, but that's not my fault, is it? It's almost as if I'm to blame.
Yes, it is.
Pete, you know,
I
you
haven't blame you as anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, Pete. It's good of you to take this on, Carl.
Guys, just stop this prevarication, right? I went out of my way today on my Tesco order to buy, right, Cornish salt. I bought Cornish salt.
I was hoping you'd call my way with a couple of duck eggs, but you don't bother.
Yeah, but you don't pay for them, do you? Because you're too tight. Right, okay then. We've obviously had news from Andy, right? So I just want to right. Who else have we got? We got Margaret. Anything from you this week, darling? I don't know
Well,
where
I was delighted. You know, Anne was telling us about this Bill Schindler. Bill Schindler, do you remember, Anne? You were telling us about
yes,
his views on diet and everything. So I looked him up.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to tell you that he thinks that people lived up in trees back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Is somebody actually saying that we had this whole thing about a year ago about people living up trees?
Yeah.
And hang on a minute, Margaret. Didn't you make a bit of a fuss that I gave the credit for that to Greener? In fact, it was you.
I said, "Oi, that was me that mentioned that, mate." And everybody poo-pooed it, but Bill Schindler agrees with me.
You remember that Homo naledi that I was telling you about the other day that was on that documentary?
Yeah.
That spent a lot of time up trees.
There you go then.
Yeah. I thought, oh, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you think about it, on the forest planet of Endor, the Ewoks lived up trees.
They did. Yeah.
I wonder if
they didn't look like they were very adapted to it, though, did they? So.
I wonder if in the early times that they lived up trees, because I mean, if we are related to the apes, I mean, they were all up trees, and it was some transition in a sense. We're related. I'm not saying we were there, but I think we probably all did lived up trees at one point, possibly.
Well, trees were probably a source of food.
Yeah. And safety. Yeah.
Well, we kept away from predators.
Their berries and things, they're always a very good source of vitamins.
Yeah.
So trees are a very good source of food for us. So it's bound to.
And a good view.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a good view.
You would live up a tree for many, many reasons, I think.
Yep. Is this where the saying "I'm off my tree" comes from?
Oh. Is that an ancient saying?
Well, I think me and Margaret are off our tree, aren't we? Right, okay then. Right, anything else from you, Adam?
I'm afraid not.
I tell you what, Adam. Right, if you would have come to us about 2 years ago, we actually had the money. We would have had the money to have given you a job, but unfortunately, those times are no longer with us.
Well,
maybe you need to work together to develop funding.
Don't give him ideas. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what it'd be like after a year working with me?
Yeah, that's true. You do need to consider that, Adam. Yeah.
You could work on that Flathome Island of Pete's, couldn't he?
Yeah.
Do something there.
Looking after the borrow-raised sheep.
They've got sheep on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same sheep I've got, so he doesn't need to go to that.
Oh, is that where you got them? Oh
no, I already did. We got ours from Cornwall.
Whoops.
No, weirdly enough, we got our borrow-raised sheep from Cornwall. It's just really odd.
Wow.
Yeah, very odd. How far away from Orkney can you get? Right. Yeah. Okay. Then. Who else? David, anything from you, and we'll get started.
No, thank you.
Right. Okay. We are going to get into it. What I've decided, we're going to focus on the subject matter today because it's very much linked with everything that we're doing with the Neolithic period. So that made sense. We are going to come back to Avebury. We were meant to be doing Avebury today, but I decided to get this set up to do this anyway. And I just that one of the things that is in my mind, which I need to do a little bit more research with. I said we were going to come back to West Kennet Long Barrow in connection with a certain question I had in regards to the clay in West Kennet Long Barrow, and I basically said, does that clay in West Kennet Long Barrow represent degraded pottery that wasn't actually fired, and therefore that gave the colour to the lower mandibles that were actually found in the clay in West Kennet Long Barrow. So I'm still trying to do a little bit of research on that. You'll know what I mean when we do that. So we're gonna share the images now, and we will be going off on our normal break at because I've had people shouting at me recently saying we didn't have a break. You went on for 2 hours. I didn't have a break. Somebody had a right go at me on Wednesday. And I think Pat said it the other week as well. So we're going to get these images up here now, if everything's fine. And what we are going to look at is No, this is another site. This is another site. But you are. If I gave you points for that, Peter, where how much would I give you? You've got the landscape right, so that's one. You've got the type of monument right, so you've got 2 out of 4, Pete. So there you go. But it's not Mice House. Right, so one of the things we're going to mention the Romans today. So one of the things that we can really think of with the landscape of monuments that we're going to do today is to say that, you know, in many ways, our prehistoric ancestors have had a huge, intimate relationship. You know, we as people, ancestors before the Romans, have had a huge intimate relationship with our surroundings. You know, our surroundings almost sort of echo our actual landscape as human beings. If we refer to us as a landscape of human beings, humanity itself, I feel, has gone beyond having a connection with the landscape. One of the things the Anthropocene thing that we've been talking about, that we've actually gone through the Anthropocene period, where humans are actually now influencing change on the planet. Before the Roman era in Britain, before AD 43, and in lots of other places, we were actually connected with the landscape. So the landscape was there, and we worked with the landscape, and we evolved with the landscape. We moved. We didn't fell all the trees. We sort of echoed the streams and the rivers and the mountains, and we tried to have it some sense of connection. So that's my opening today, right? So what has this got to do with the sordid nature of desire? The landscape is very sensual, and you can take of as it will from the images that we're actually seeing today, and trying to really sort of echo what these monuments are, and what these monuments symbolize to us. So I think last time when we're looking at desire and landscape, we talked about the phallus, and we talked about whether the phallus is to be seen as a sexual symbolic basis of our understanding today, or whether the phallus meant something else. And we talked about that in great detail last time. Whether that was embarrassing to you or not, we were trying to echo what this world is about. Now, this monument is a monument I've actually been to, right? And interesting enough, this is the Queen chambered tomb, and yes, this is very similar to Mice House, so that's why Peter had 1 point. And Queen is actually within the Orkney archipelago, and it's Neolithic. So that's the other thing. I wanted to put some of this Neolithic thing in. So sex and death are 2 subjects not often associated in the minds of modern people, but this was not always the case. Now, am I right in that? Because we're bombarded by sex porn, we're bombarded by, even when we're looking at the Carry On films, we were like bombarded by nuance, and we were bombarded by the hidden meaning, right? But maybe in the past, what we're thinking of is that the past, whether it was sexual, whether it was connection, was more fluid and more sensual and more connected than we are today with the landscape. I think that's what we mean by that. So what we can think of is particularly in ancient folklore in the likes of Cornwall, Wales, in other parts of the landscape. The sense of sexual symbolism is there, but whether you see sexual symbolism in the sense of a female deity, and that some of those female deities may be familiar for you, as in Caredwen and Glotherwedd, Caredwen and Glotherwedd, these deities which were sort of in the folklore of that landscape of Wales and elsewhere, and maybe going into Cornwall with other names for these individuals. These female deities are either sexual, or they governed regeneration, and to see how death sort of intertwines on that cycle of life. Christ, what a bloody opening today. This is really complicated stuff for me to even voice these words. I wrote, and this isn't actually anything in front of me I'm reading out either. I wrote a column for the local newspaper today, and I just thought, right, okay, I don't think the Barry readership is going to understand any of this because I was in the moment. Some of you were mentioning books earlier on. I've had people moaning and groaning. I haven't come out with a book recently, so I got to adjust that one. But away from that, and one of the things personally when I'm putting my YouTube videos out there and my TikToks is I'm using the monuments and the stuff around me to communicate, right? That's why I do it. I communicate. I'm communicating with you now. So I'm using the landscape of archaeology to communicate with you, to try to open your mind. As I said in the last lecture, I said, if you don't see anything sexual or sensual or any meaning in these sites, you've seen the sites and you know where they are. So we're looking at a number of different sites today, and mainly Neolithic, but not all. So these concepts, stronger proof, concepts of sex and death intertwined, not just once, but in our minds today, in past cultures, not just in Britain. We can look, for example, at Asian deities like Radha, Radga, that was a mouthful. Ragda is a Southeastern Asian mythological goddess of sex. And you can think about things like the Kama Sutra, and you can think about all these other things. But what we've got to do is when we're looking at the Kama Sutra and we're thinking about Ragda, what we've got to do, we've got to see the concept of sex as being living, breathing, as being part of the landscape. Everything could have a sexual meaning, and then everything doesn't need to have a sexual meaning. It's how your concepts of sex and death intertwine in past cultures, which we're delving into today within the earthly confines of prehistoric landscapes, of prehistoric chambers, and one or two stones as well. Now, one of the things that we were really familiar last week, and I other than Pete, we did a lecture last week on the stone circle at Avebury, in Wiltshire, and obviously not so long ago we looked at the West Kennet Barrow. In many ways, to try and explain the past, we look at monuments like this, like Coe, and we think, right, can we see something else to them, or do we invent the past, or can we see a sexual womb or a vulva? Can we see the sexualness, or do we just look at these sites for what they are, monuments of the past that were created by our ancestors? Sometimes we get so obsessed with like thinking about, you know, this is that and whatever. But as I was doing last week, when I know some of you probably thought he was obsessed with ditches last week. That's all he talked about, with ditches at Avebury. He was obsessed by it. But what I was trying to do last week was I was trying to say, look, the ditch at Avebury itself was a great achievement, was a great connection, was a great association with linking in with the landscape, was a great association with creating something. Creating something in the past, whatever it is, always has meaning. And you know, today we take things for granted. We look for appraisal of our modern landscape from the internet and television instead of actually going out and looking at it. And I'm admired by what Adam did the other week. You know, he went all the way to Colchester to find that mosaic. Now that's because he wanted to see it. He wanted that connection instead of just listening to me or looking at stuff on the internet. So he's actually getting connected to these things. So when we think about Avebury, it's not all about something that is extremely large, right? 365 meters across, if you remember, right? All the length of the West Kennet Barrow, over 100 meters in length, right? These kindle the kindest and most expressive expressions of some of our ancestors. The sense of communality and community, the sense of where we're moving into the Neolithic period, building such sites like this for the community. And the point is not to think as you know, we will come back to Caerwyn in a moment. That's inside Caerwyn, right? When we're looking at something like this, is it all about sort of communal tombs? Is it all about sort of burying people in these tombs? I've been in there. It was a really strange experience. Is it all about this? And Caerwyn itself is on the side of a mountain, basically, and it overlooks Orkney, and it's a really odd site, right? And there's lots to be said about Caerwyn, and maybe we might go to it again. The crest of a high ridge. We could talk about this, like West Kennet Longbarrow, the crest of a high chalky ridge. Like lots of these sites, what we do when we think about sites like Caerwyn, when we think about going back and looking at Avebury, when we look at West Kennet Longbarrow, which is aligned east-west, and we get these gigantic mounds of these pimples sticking out of the landscape like Caerwyn. These can be these can retrieve ideas. What we do as archaeologists, we excavate these monuments and we wish to retrieve the past. Sometimes we really screw it up. Sometimes our interpretations are wrong. Sometimes our understanding of these sites is wrong. When we excavate these sites, we do untold damage to the layers. And when the layers are gone, the layers are gone. They're gone forever. But what we've got is the artifacts and the proper layers and the proper context, Adam and everyone else know what I'm talking about. The context of history, right? What do these monuments give to us? What are the astonishing facts that allow us to light into the world of rituals and beliefs beyond these prehistoric tomb builders? Now, you know, many times we look at these monuments, and I remember last week, I think it was you guys, it may have been Wednesday. Oh yeah, it was you guys. I said look at how Skara Brae looks, right? And then have a look at how Skara Brae is a village, as you know, on Orkney. And I said, well, try and compare this with something like Maes Howe, which is referred to as a burial chamber, right? And structurally look very similar. You know, main room, little compartments, maybe a passage into them, right? One's for living, clearly, and one's for apparently just for burial. But in many ways, these monuments are so well built, like this one at Caerwyn, that we think that we very much, I think that they must be a lot more than just a burial context. There must be a lot more going on than thinking about this as burial. Life in the pit of death, life and regeneration within Caredwen and Beloddwedd, in the sense of death and regeneration as being the same process. From death, you've got life. From death, you plant and a tree grows. One of the things that I've mentioned times in the past is when we find oak trees in a hedge and we find human remains directly underneath the oak tree. That's because the people buried in that hedge wish to have an oak tree protruding from their belly to give life, to give more life to that hedge. So in life, there's death, and death there's life and regeneration. Do you know what it's like to have a baby lamb and you know, just looking at it and thinking, wow. We all know as human beings, I've seen one of my children being born as it's coming out, right? Some of us haven't had their experience, and we're thinking, right, yeah, this is regeneration. This is a new life. But our ancestors had these very same experiences. So again, marooning the sense and thinking about these very, very monuments. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go off piece a minute. I want to do a little bit more about West Kennet Longbarrow and try and fit in, and then go back to this site. So what we're going to do, this is pseudo deliberate. So what we're going to do, we're going to look there, and we're just going to do there. We're going to type in West Kennet. I need West Kennet on the screen. I need it on the screen, right? Rather than just talking about it, I just need it on the screen. That's inside. Hang on, that's inside. And looking at that, I want some other images. These are not for me. I'm just going to type in this again. West Kennet. We all know where this is. This is in Wiltshire, and in the beating, pulsating heart of southern England. And West Kennet, and hopefully, what we've got is that very monument. Okay, so thinking about that, right? As you come from the valley, as you go up on top of the ridge, and eventually you see this. Walking up onto this ridge, the barrow lies like a green-hulled ship marooned in a sea of waving corn. Never seen it in that corn. And then you just look over there, you go past those stones, and you see a chambered entrance. And let's have a little look at this chambered entrance. Let's just have, there you go, you're looking into this sort of chambered entrance. Chambered entrance lies at the eastern end of the barrow, Neolithic barrow, facing the warming rays of the early morning sun, and guarded by a daunting rank of vertical stones. In archaeology, we can call them orthostats. Despite the breeze rustling the long grass on the mound, the inside of the tomb is silent and still. Now, that's an interesting thing. When we go back to Kaween, lots of these monuments are silent and still. He cannot disagree with me about Maes Howe. Yet inside, it's silent and still. You're underground in some of these souterrains on Orkney. They're silent and still. There's something about the silence and the stillness, right? I wandered in my roundhouse yesterday, right? Because we've got that seagull in there, and we haven't actually moved into the roundhouse yet, but it's nearly there. And I remember sitting in there. It was blowing a gale outside. It was raining, and I was just sitting there, and I was there. It's so calm in here. It's so there. It's so silent and still. In many ways, when we look at the past, we think of the past as a running chapter of pages that you continually turn, right? The world of the past, and still is today, it can be very brutal. But in the sense of brutality, in the sense of burial and death, or whatever these things were originally used for, and then they become a sense of burial and death, there's a sense of silence and stillness about them. And going back again, looking, actually, there you are, looking inside and out. What we've got is a stone-lined passage, extends into the body of the earthen mound, and we've got chambers as you go down. You've got chambers on the left, 2 chambers on the left, 2 chambers on the right, and you're looking from the chamber itself, and that space itself, that 5th chamber, that space itself, the dark walls of the passage, the sense, the cold air, the clamminess, when outside it's a hot day, it's almost as if it's another world. And that is rather interesting. As human beings, we created other worlds within a landscape, and that is rather interesting. Today, if we need to have that effect of having other worlds and so on, we go to the cinema and watch a film, or we go to the Millennium Dome, or we go and see a concert, right? Back then, they could go to other worlds without the massive amount of effort that we do today. And when we think about this, when we're reminded of this, we've got near on 50 odd individuals which have been uncovered through the excavations here, but many more bodies may have been found in other excavations that we are unwary of their findings. As was common in Neolithic times throughout, lots of the bodies had been exposed within the causewayed enclosure landscape. Sky burial had been exposed until all the flesh had disappeared before the remains were conveyed in the tomb, usually long bones usually skulls with their lower mandibles, but without the phalanges and the vertebra and all these other bones which would have been left behind. Again, back with West Kennet Long Barrow, before we move on to Coween, these 5 chambers, in many ways, see a sense of sexuality, see a sense of that there are male and female buried in them, young and poor. Strangely, though, what we do find, as I've said, we don't get a full representation of all the bones here. And we see that at many of these sites. The universal cycle of rebirth was being enacted not only at this West Kennet chamber, were being enacted on the Gower, were being acted at Bungheckley D on Anglesey, were enacted at all the different places. Castlerig, we're looking over to Orkney and we're thinking about Coween. All this sense of rebirth, life and death. These monuments across the world, when we go to North America, and when we go into the European landscape, we're thinking about light as well, light and dark. That continual sense of light and dark. As you go underground, it's dark. As you come out, it's light. And even at night, you look up and you see the moon and the stars. But within, it's a different world altogether. But when we think about this being of the remains of humans and a burial on the top of a hill, what we can also think of is that these types of monuments are a lot more than just burial. As I keep trying to get at, what we also see is the remains of animals at these sites as well. Perhaps when we look at these sites, we might actually find evidence of plowshares in them, right? What's all that about? That's about rebirth and planting crops and so on. And we look at these sites for a sense of feasting. Well, I usually think away from that, but sometimes we might take bones of animals into these moments in time, these passages of time. And what we've got, we're going to go directly to Coween now. Well, what we've got when we think about Coween, right? When we think about the Coween chamber, and we think about Orkney, animals are very important as well. So hang on, let's get to there. Let's get to this one. I'm loving this. So I can remember going to Coween, right? And it was Coween itself, a round mound rather than a long earthen mound like West Kennet. These round mounds, like Coween, some people have said that Coween itself could, in a way, represent the entrance into a womb. But this, again, is an enchanting sight. When we think about Orkney, we visit Orkney a lot, and you know, Orkney mainland and the islands, Orkney mainland, lying at the point where the waters of the North Sea merge with the swirling Atlantic Ocean, is an exposed but fertile landscape whose patchwork of small fields has been farmed since and beyond the Neolithic age. Why am I so drawn to Orkney? Well, I was actually in Arnside, right? I was staying in Arnside, and somebody in the YHA was I used to stay out every single week. There was this chap. He said, "Oh, I live on Orkney." I said, "Oh, okay." He said, "Oh, why didn't you come up to Orkney?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." So I went to Orkney, and I just fell in love with the place. And at one time, I was going to buy a house there, and I didn't though. But I've led trips to Orkney, and there's something very spiritual about the landscape. There really, really is. It's like it's you know, there's something. I'll tell you two things that I've sort of experienced recently. I went into a local shop, right? I went into a local restaurant, right? And up until sort of recently, it had been owned by these like really spiritual people, and it was like, you know, whatever. And I wandered in there, and without knowing that it changed hands, the atmosphere of that place had completely changed. It was almost as if it was negative. And I went to the counter and I said, "Where's so and so?" And they said, "Oh, they basically sold the business." And it was like a sense that there was a sense of change, and that was without knowing that it changed. And there's a reason for this. And I got in contact with somebody yesterday that I hadn't spoken to for ages, and she sent me a video of something, right, to do with horses. And I wrote back to her and I said, "My God, I know this video is about horses, but I feel you in this video. I feel your connection. I feel your power in this video," right? And that was by just looking at these images, right? And actually the example in the top. And the point I'm just trying to make is that you can get a sense of connection. You can get a sense of something, even just by standing at these places, right? By looking at them or looking away, you know, so superbly, as we said, Kaween, elevated position, high on the eastern slopes of the hill of Heddle, with incredible views over the blue, wind-whipped waters of the Bay of Firth, is a superbly built chamber tomb of Kaween. Now, I think I've been there twice, actually. Maybe I've obviously been there once. On days when clouds are being driven across the sky, the wind up here can be almost too strong to stand against. But then, and there it is. If you want to know, there it is, and it actually overlooks Kirkwall and the airport. And you can see planes landing, but obviously not in the past. Looking in here, you duck into the passageway under the mound, and you enter a world of immediate stillness that is dizzying, overridingly dizzying after being buffeted outside. And it's you know, in many ways, right? We look at Arborough in Derbyshire, and we look at Castlereagh, and we look at Stonehenge, and we go there in the rain and the wind and it's crap, or we go there on a nice day and it's sunny, right? We don't need to think like that. We need to go to these places in all weathers, right, and see that they're still dizzying, and they've still got a sense of connection. Obviously, you'd be lucky to shelter from the wind and the rain if it was raining or windy at Castlereagh, right? But the point is, it is a sense of space. I'm very much the sense of space, the sense of the line, the sense of connection. And Andy knows what I'm talking about, and hopefully Adam does if he's read my thesis. But you know, I went into I put up a little sort of a building here the other day, right? And obviously it was meshed around. It was like a cage, big cage, right? And it was raining outside and all the rest of it, and wind and so on. And I went inside the cage, and it was like a different world. But except the only thing stopping the rain and the wind coming in was this mesh. So it was coming in. But what I'm trying to say, any sense of space, any sense of walls, which is obviously you move away from the outside world, any sense of being surrounded by things, and it's almost as if the world changes in lots of ways. Peter knows what I'm talking about when he goes to Flatholme. You can see over to Cardiff, and you can see over to different places, right? But when you're on Flatholme, it's almost as if, whether it's raining or windy and it's freezing cold there, right? It's a nice place to be, right? Because your atmosphere is different. It's a change. One thing that we really don't get in the modern day and age is that we can't disconnect ourselves from the other stuff going on. Like I mentioned, the airport, like I mentioned Kirkwall. But if you look out on a different angle, you can see a different world, a different landscape, and you're going out from the rain and you're going inside. Queen is a small tomb, but it's architectural more than makes up for it in style, right? Anything that lacks in size, it's a lot smaller than Mice House. Right, so the intimate scale of the small main chamber, which you're looking into, which can be spanned with outstretched arms. Well, I'm probably not me, but maybe I don't know, Andy. Feels appropriate for the delicately thin layers of Orcadian flagstone that form the walls and beautifully corbelled roof. Corbelled, as you know, overlapping stones to create a corbelled roof. Right. I've been in a really small example of this. I went to the island of Rousey, right? And the owner of this burial chamber, she said, the burial chamber in my garden, whilst the others just sat with her drinking whiskey, right? I don't drink, so anyway. So I went with Bill. Now you've all met Bill. So me and Bill, we just shuffled into this tiny little thing, really crammed in like sardines, right? And it was like a weird experience. And then the dog joined us. There was a dog with us, right? And it was corbelled as well. And I just thought there's something really interesting about the sense of this. There really, really is. So even after a dry spell, the stones inside are damp to the touch, right? That's really odd. It's a really odd statement to make. When in fact, when you go from the outside inside and it's raining outside and it's windy, you go inside and you've got that experience of dryness, but the walls are still damp. Peter will know what I'm talking about. When we go to Karl-james or Haligi, it can be completely dry outside, but the walls are still damp, even after a dry spell. And this artificially illuminates the chamber because there's like a glistening on the walls, right? There's like a glistening on the walls, right? But when you're in here, naturally, there is a sense of darkness, right? But that darkness is taken away from the experience that you've already experienced with the wind. So in each of the four walls is an opening into a tiny stone-lined side chamber. And I tell you what, they are very, very damp. Very, very damp indeed, those chambers. You scurry in them, you really do. And interesting enough, this is, you know, when I have actually, nobody's actually said anything recently, folks, right? You've not said it, but I've just been talking about human beings constantly, right? I've been talking about the human experience, right? Nobody's mentioned, well, what about the animals, right? Interesting enough, a Kaween, they found 24 dog skulls inside this, 24 dog skulls. The remains of 5 humans were also found here, right? And you're thinking about this, right? You're looking at this and you're thinking dog skulls, right? How many dog skulls do you find in tombs elsewhere in Britain? You find occasionally, but not 24, right? You don't find all these dog skulls in West Kennet, right? You know, and the remains of 5 humans were also found, represented. And when you think about that, these particular bones were collected, which represented thigh bones and skulls. These bones of 5 human beings that were collected. Deposition suggests that similarly, when you look at this, these bones were placed in in a certain important, powerful way, right? Is that a sexual, powerful way of putting them in there? Or what I'm getting at? Let's not be confused with my direction. The direction is that I believe these were too well built, right? I know Queen itself. In the early stages of constructing Queen, we don't have any human remains. The human remains and the dog bones come in later, right? So what are these about? And you're thinking that actually this idea that they're selecting bones and skulls and putting them in there, and the dog skulls, and when we're looking at the likes of the Tomb of the Eagles on South Ronaldsley, right? Those skulls and human remains have been selected as well. when we think about the Neolithic, bearing in mind about the Neolithic society, they're communicating not with us. Now that's the other mistake that we make. We always believe that our ancestors are communicating with us. Why?
I'm silent, Carl.
Carl's not communicating with us.
I'm
here. What do you mean I'm silent?
You stopped talking.
Am I talking now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When did I stop communicating?
You just went quiet.
When you said our ancestors were communicating with us, but all of a sudden you weren't.
See, exactly, that's the point. Sorry. I'm sorry you walked into that one. No. But Margaret, you know, can we just have me and you have a bombastic chat a minute, right? Do we deserve the right to presume that these people are actually communicating with us?
Well, do you know, look, I feel very comfortable in around these stone edifices. They feel kind of vaguely familiar to me. I don't know why, but I love to see the old stone structures and the old stone circles. They make me feel very happy. I definitely have a happy feeling. I feel quite at home. I don't know is it an ancestral memory?
No,
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, can we just stop there before you go any further, right? Because that's a really good point, right? You know, my children, for example, right? I was the amounts of times that you know we think, right, we're going to be there and we're going to be the first people to hear our children talk, and we're going to be the first people to see our children walk, and then you turn your mind to go and get a bloody cup of tea, and they're walking around the room, and you're thinking, right, have they copied that from us, right? Also, maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but the point is that our children avoid certain things. For example, why do they avoid spiders? You know, why do some children like spiders and others don't? Why are some children drawn to eat red berries and others will not touch red berries, right? Why are some children only eating veg and other children only eating meat, right? So that ties in with what you're saying. I believe there's a lot in what you've said, Margaret. There's a lot in this sort of memory. There's a lot in this connection. So this is what I'm trying to do today. We're doing subtle sex, right? What we're trying to do is try to see whether these do represent the body of Mother Earth at Kaween. And the other thing as well is, if they do represent the body of Earth at Kaween, right? When does the burial stuff come into this? And then you're starting to think people changed. This itself, back to this compact rounded mound. There we go, rounded mound. Is a tight, pregnant body or bell of Earth, and the stones and the symbolism intended in the narrow passageway to get into here would not have required explanation in a culture where such a metaphor was deeply rooted in tradition. Now, we're presuming that this was deeply rooted in tradition, right? But one thing is clear: our ancestors built these monuments, and a lot of them, for certain reasons, and in different reasons across the country, right? I will challenge any archaeologist that tells you that these were all constructed for exactly the same reason at exactly the same time across Britain. I will challenge anyone who says that, because these are all constructed for different reasons at different times across Britain, right? We think about, we can go off and think about ancient cosmology, right? We can think about, and this nice little site here is the Drumcragan Khan, this one. We can think about cosmology. We can think about connecting with the stars, right? We can think about the womb of a great earth goddess, right? And we can think of all these things, but maybe we can think of all these things going on at the same time. Now, this is a rather strange monument. And I showed you, there it is, right? There's a very strange monument. This is the Dun Craig Khan. Now, if I was going to try and translate what that means, Dun, Craig. Now, Craig would mean stone, and Dun would mean a place or tower. So it's basically the Tower of Stone, right? If that's the right translation, right? It's described by a writer known as Julian Cope, whose name does sort of come into my mind occasionally. He says that this site itself, the Craig Khan, is a fulsome, uproaring, feminine cleft, a mother slit in the side of a big Khan belly. The great capstone protrudes from the inside like megalithic labia. Now, I think that's quite expressive, and that's quite sort of bombastic. And you've got to ask the question, and I don't think we've ever really asked this question before. Why do we immediately assume that they've got why have they got to have a sexual undertone, right? But then again, the other week we were talking about the Hellfire Club. We were thinking about standing stones. We were thinking about stones in the shape of phalluses and all these different wonderful things, right? Why do we have to think there's a sexual symbolism with them? Maybe we're lost. Maybe we're trying to find more. Maybe we're going to trying to connect with something else. So 12,000 years ago, the west coast where this is to be found, and this isn't 12,000 years ago, the west coast of Scotland was still in the grip of an ice age. And the valley that now holds the tranquil waters of Loch Hy then contained a vast mountain scouring glacier. When the ice eventually melted, flood waters roared through the Kilmartin Glen. There we go. Not too well. It's across that landscape. The Kilmartin Glen to the south, depositing whole terraces of waterborne sand and gravel on their way to the sea. So when you're thinking about it, the Mother Nature made the landscape fertile. Is this what these monuments are about? Made the landscape fertile. In time, these fertile terrace slopes descended to the floor of one of Britain's prettiest valleys, providing an agricultural utopia where early farmers chose to settle and grow their crops. Eventually, it is where they were buried, overlooking the great landscape that they tilled the soil. And this itself, here at the foot of the slopes of Barnasail, a stream slowly meanders through a fabulous, would help if we had it, fabulous, rich prehistoric landscape. And the ground between its watery loops is packed with ancient sites of ceremonial enclosure, cut mark standing stones. We're going to do them soon. Cut marks, an outstanding example of prehistoric rock art, and the chambered cairn of Craig, as we've said. There's another way of saying it. Craig, and there it is. Craig itself is a remarkable monument. It's a mound of great boulders and water-washed pebbles, and this was excavated in 1864 by an enthusiastic antiquarian named Canon William Greenwell. Does that ring a bell? Does that take us back to the barrow diggers? Visitors today could be forgiven for not at first recognizing the covert sexuality embodied by these stones. And the ceremonial importance of the tomb was made clear, however, by Greenwell's discovery of artifacts including a flint knife and a fine greenstone axe, prized objects that would have been a ritual rather than purely practical value to their owners. Well, okay, leave that there. But one of my sort of reactions to people talking about these monuments, having a sexual connotation, is that when you look at them, you're looking at them after they've been excavated, right? So you could equally say that the sexuality was covered up, and like women should be adorned with clothes and not naked. And therefore, why are we seeing the nakedness of this monument today? That's in my head. Although now disturbed and overgrown with turf, it is this monument, our Dun Craig, itself, that it is so intriguing. The entrance to the mound is exquisite. A narrow, dark slit is overlain by a wide stone lintel in an arrangement described by one prehistorian as a fulsome, uproaring, feminine cleft, a mother slit in the side of a big Khan belly. That quote again. The great capstone that holds all the structure is placed protrude from the inside like a megalithic labela, and the chamber of a Neolithic Khan has never before been so sexual. Now, that's what Margaret, right? That's what I was going to ask. And Margaret, my darling, going, nah.
It looks like a great big mouth.
I'm liking what you're saying. Why can't we think of that?
It does look like a great big mouth to me.
Do you want to kiss it?
Hmm?
Do you want to kiss the mouth? No, I'm serious. I'm serious. Is it? Hang on, Anne. Not Anne. Not Anne. Don't giggle, Margaret. Is it inviting you in though? You said it is. You said earlier on you feel at home with these monuments.
Oh yeah. I would. Yes, I'm definitely drawn to it.
Right, nice.
I can't see anything sexual there, or no, it just looks like a great big gaping mouth to me.
Right, well, that leads us on to the next. Is this, when you think about this, when we look at the eye, can we appreciate the innuendo of a pile of stone? Is there innuendo in a pile of stone? Is it palpable that there was a symbolism in the Neolithic of settlers wishing to have a sexually charged atmosphere at these sites? Now we've got to not dismiss it all, right? As me and Margaret, are we dismissing this? No, we're having a conversation, right? We think about this, right? And as we move on to the as we move on, we start to understand the rest of this landscape. We think of this, and we think about burials, and we think about honoring the dead and ceremony. Now that's an interesting one. We find burials, and actually I will make the point, we haven't found burials and cremations at all of these burial chambers, right? That's a fact. We haven't found why. So why are they all called burial chambers? Anyway, that goes back to the point. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go to a place called Kraganish, right? We're going to go to Kraganish, which is another one, right? Now, we've moved a little bit. We've not moved too far away, right? This is King Trow, right? This is a standing stone. This is King Trow. So this over. Oh, hang on. I'm showing the stone. Have I? Oh, there we go. There's a stone. I'm losing. Oh, hang on. Where's the stone? There it is. There's our stone. I nearly missed our stone then. You can clearly see it's overlooking the landscape. On a clear day, this looks over the paps of Jura. And the paps of Jura, right? If I want to show you the paps of Jura, right, and I got to make sure I get the image right. That overlooks. Hang on a minute. Is that, yeah? That overlooks that. Right. That overlooks that, right? And I've shown this image to two people today, and one of them said, "Oh, that looks like buttocks." And they're both women, and the other one said that looks like breasts, right? So paps of Jura outrageously breast-shaped hills 27 miles distant across the Sound of Jura. And that is what this stone looks out over, would have formed the backdrop of a spectacular performance. Now, as some of you who have read my work in regards to acting and archaeology and the sense of the performance, history is a performance. Monuments of the past are a performance. It's an interplay of what you believe they may have seen or may not have seen, or maybe what we're seeing today. Right, what we've got to do, right? Who do I pick on now? Right, Adam, right? Adam, right? I want you to I was going to say, Adam, I want you to play with me, but that's a really bad term. Right, Adam, I want you to look from there, right?
Yeah.
Right. I want you to look from there. Have you ever seen this before?
No, never.
Intro? Never. Right. Okay. You're just standing there now. Time machine, right? And you look, and it's now starting to get about this time of night, right? What are you seeing? What does that do for you? This is in the distance. Tell me what you're seeing. Do it.
Yeah, it definitely looks like a pair of breasts to me.
Right. Okay then. Right. Okay. You said it looks like a pair of breasts. Tell us more.
Anything more?
I want more. You
it could be a woman laying on her side even.
Ah.
Did you say a woman lying on her side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, you've just quoted from a book that I'm writing, right? Yeah. I've in a book that is actually quite a sensual book and whatever, but it's not sexual, it's sensual. I've described a monument as an archaeological monument as a female body, right? And I've described it as you know, the belly and the breasts. I've described it in that way. You've just done that. You've never seen this monument before, right? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a risk, right? And I'm going to go with Pete to tell us what he is seeing. What are you seeing, Pete?
Well, it's what you can use your imagination and think of it as a lady laying on her side, as he says, or as a pair of breasts, but it has got a sexual connotation to it, no matter which way you look at it.
And that's two of you, right? I want a female point. I want to go back to I want Anne. Anne, give them something else.
I think, I mean, I agree it could be a female. I think it could equally well be a man lying on his side with his shoulder slightly forward, rather than, you know, like I tend to sleep sort of on my stomach. I'm sure I'd look like that with the back of me up, if you see what I mean. It could be a man.
Okay. I'm
with hips like that.
Now, come on, who's being pedantic here? Now, come away with you. Come away. Right. So anyway, let's anyway. Thanks for all that. That was really nice that we've had that interplay. Now, I've not put any of this in your minds, right? This is the performance of the landscape. Our ancestors performed and interpreted the landscape as we've just done, right? In a composition of looking at this landscape, the eloquence of what you're seeing a bit of water there. You're seeing a few of the bits and pieces in the background. I think that's too close for the Papadura landscape. But when we think about this, right, the people who erected this stone, right, did they mean, was it their intention to have this aligned with this, right? Now, if it was their intention to have this aligned with this, move away from the sexual. Maybe this is to do with mid-winter sunset, and the setting sun on the shortest day of the year would have sunk behind the paps of Jura, perhaps witnessed from a platform in the hillside behind the stone. I'm liking that. But then again, we're always doing those performances in the past. The past is a performance. You know, it's like you know, there's certain films that they do remake after remake after remake, and you're thinking, why are they doing a remake after remake? You know, yeah, you've got 1,000 versions of Hamlet, which are on celluloids, right? You can watch 1,000 different versions of Hamlet, and each of them will say something different. But the one thing that goes through all those performances of Hamlet is human experience, and the stage and the performance and the backdrop is the same. It's Hamlet, right? As we're seeing with this darkness, though the sun reappears, blazing for a moment in the cleavage between the hills before finally setting again. Within the view of the sacred mountainous caps, the Kintrow stone was erected as a symbol of impregnating power, a fertilizing shaft that perhaps in shadow form added its virility to the mounded burial womb of the landscape that is there. So the other thing that we've missed out completely is the sun. You know, we miss the moon, we miss the sun, we miss the stars, and you know what we sometimes do as an archaeologist, we get obsessed with not allowing others to say things, and we've got to be more open to that, as we've just done. The sun was certainly an important element in the design of prehistoric burial places as centers of fertility and of rebirth, but that is a contradiction. Many tombs throughout the British Isles were built to honor the rising and setting of the sun on auspicious days throughout the year. And there is perhaps no finer example than Maes Howe on the Scottish islands of Orkney. Yes, Pete, I'm glad you've joined us today, because we're going to do that. You know, I've got to reiterate, when you look at New Grange and some other sites, I think we've got one image of New Grange today. When we think of these, you've got to be very wary whether they were all to do principally for burial or whatever they start off to be. The past is a performance where each of us can have a right to change our mind, and there's a right to have these monuments as other things other than the sense of burial. Now we've got to go to Maes Howe, right? Maes Howe, and we'll be taking a break soon as well. We'll take a nice little break, because I'll hang on a minute. I'm going to see, we've got, oh, hang on, I've lost my images a minute. Right, there we go. Hang on, up that there, pictures, right. We've got lots of these still to go through, so whether, you know, let's go to Maes Howe, right? For those that don't know where Maes Howe, there is Maes Howe, right? Smack bang on the west island. Well, right, start again. West mainland of Orkney, right? Don't call it island, you'll be burnt at the stake. So this, looking from inside out, okay, that there is actually one long length of stone, right, that was once upright alongside the ones on the left and the right as you go in. You've got to like shuffle in there. This distinctive hump on the landscape, right, and there was no sexual thing meant by hump. This distinctive hump, the sweeping lines of Mouse High rise like a gigantic wide-brimmed hat, but its core is evidence of Neolithic sophistication. Named Mishu, that sounds Chinese, but Mishu, or if we want it, Mershu, Viking Mershu, named Mershu by the Vikings, ended up as in Maes Howe. Maes is actually the Welsh word for field, which is odd. And then we got Mershu, Viking, mentioned in the epic account of the Arcadian saga, and the tomb dates back to a time 4,000 years before these Norse raiders broke into the chamber and left their graffiti scrawled on its walls. Now that's interesting, right? And I want to tell you what some of this graffiti said, but because this is being recorded, and there's certain restrictions, some of the wording scrawled in runes on the wall were of men having sex in there, right? For example, I think there's 2 accounts where a certain Viking is said to have had a nice sexual occurrence with a very attractive woman inside the burial chamber, right? And I've got to try and give you some more context. Basically, when the Vikings broke in there, it's like the Vikings broke in there sort of maybe in about the 900s, and then and they buried somebody in there, and then other Vikings went in there and looted the burial, right? And that's when the graffiti comes in, right? And you're thinking that's really interesting, right? Well, the Vikings are having sex inside Mice House, and it might be an appropriate place, and it might be an inappropriate place, right? But the point is, I've mentioned that, right? Other people doing things in a chamber like this, they're having sex. The Vikings are recording themselves having sex in there, right? Are these places in the Neolithic period that people may have had sex? Interesting. We're not going to go with that, but the Vikings did. But the Vikings didn't build these things, did they? Mice House, renowned as the finest megalithic tomb in northwestern Europe. It is also the largest cairn of its type in Scotland. It was built on an artificial level platform by the southern shores of the Loch of Harray by a society who can be identified through the use of their groove pottery and people who lived at Scarabray and Barnhouse and other sites, and also the Ness of Brodgar. And again, looking at from inside out, the light's coming towards you. The light's almost coming towards you and pulling you out, right? And I tell you what, right? It was. I had that. I told you about the conversation I had with the tour guide, and she showed me these Neolithic, almost Neolithic writing in there, right? Anyway, we'll leave that for another day. She said to me, I know this is the roof has had to be reconstructed because of originally corbelled. We tried to do our best. But if you talk as loud as you can, right? And I said, what are you on about? She said, just shout at me. I said, I can't shout at you. Tour guy said, shout at me. Right. So I went across, and it was almost by the time I got to the middle of it, she said, what did you say? I said, I just shouted at you. She said, I couldn't hear you. Anyway, there's like a weird reverse echo chamber in there, right? Just put that in your mind. It's odd. So these people themselves lived within the landscape of their burial mounds, because Stennis is where the barn house is just like a mile away. It's on the actual lakes of Loch Harray, actually not a mile away, but kilometres away. And you've got the Ness of Brodgar and so on. Scarabray's a few miles away towards the west. This distinctive mound of Mice House, raised from the peaceful cow-grazed fields like a gigantic wide-brimmed hat, as we've said. It's sophisticated, it's astonishing, it's Neolithic, and it's a building that's been changed over time, right? It's a building that's been altered. It's a building that was one thing, it's a building that was another thing, and it's a building that has changed throughout time. What I'm trying to say, it was originally a ring of standing stones. And I said, look, guys, girls, right, we're going to build a chamber, right? So you go in there, right? Yeah, you've got on your left, right, and forward, you've got 3 little chambers, right? Like a little crucifix, right? Which is sort of typical of the Neolithic period. But we could do that again. The square section passageway is lined with sharp edge blocks, shaped so neatly before being fitted together that it is impossible to slip even a knife blade between them. Did you know that little fact? Oh God, you know what? I sod my images, right? I want to show you some more images of Mice House, right? Sorry, I can't. I need to do more. Right? Maybe I should have. I've over prepped the lecture today, right? But I've under prepped some detail. So what we're going to do I thought we'd just do Mice Howe quickly because we'd be doing it again, but I can't do it this way. So that's, again, look at that. I know they've reconstructed part of the roof inside because it's broken into by the Vikings. Right, so that's looking inside, right? So if we go out again, that's looking outwards. You've got a chamber on your left and your right, and you're looking from a chamber. That's what it looks like in the field, right? This huge pimple in the field, right? It's really well looked after. The Scottish Heritage has done a great job with that. So if we go back again, right, we'll go back, and again, this is, there's the plans of it. So you go down here, right? You've got a little chamber at the end. You've got little two side chambers. It's quite long. It's a beautiful monument. It really, really is worth a visit. And that's looking out again, right? Loving it. And the lines, and it's perfect. It's perfect within, right? It's a 9 meters in length passageway, right? You can see it now why it's 9 meters, and the stones that are laid on the floor and the side were actually originally standing stones. So 9 meters in length. The passage can be just about entered bent double. One Viking raider left a scroll pun. Yes. As you go in as well. So yes, something to do with sexual activity with a haughty woman. It emerges into a magnificent high celled vault. There it is. None of this has been changed. It's just the ceiling has had to be reconstructed, and a corbelled roof of Arcadian flagstone, but together entirely without the use of mortar. I actually, yeah, Pete was surprised last week when I said I made some stone steps. Pete, my stone steps have really turned out well, but I've had to use concrete. I've not done a mortar mix because I've actually put gravel, because the shapes of my stones are like nothing like this. They're all over the place. So I've had to do a concrete mix, right? So I needed concrete. I could never have created something like this. But these are flagstones. They're naturally linear. They're naturally, yeah. So this itself,
local geology lends itself to that sort of structure.
It totally does, Pete. It completely does. 1000%. It really does, Pete. It really, really does. And again, you're looking into it there. And that bit's sort of been reconstructed for tourist dollar, but there it is from the distance. And it really does. You can see it from the road. And now that that's a bit of a weird image. Basically, what they've done, they've if you can think about that as a square, right? So that one on the right is like the end from the passage, and then you've got the left and the right. But you can see that it's really interesting the way they've done that. It's like a panoramic, isn't it? But within a square. So from each of the 4 walls, a waist high portal opens into a small side chamber, and on the floor before each opening lie the finely tapered stones that were used to seal these chambers, these individual chambers. You can actually see there's a block there, right? There's 3 of them. These were sealed at one stage, but also almost a block that can be taken in and out. Part of the way along the entrance chamber is a recess in the wall. It houses a block of stone estimated to weigh at least 1 ton, but which is said to be so carefully placed as to be moved with the pressure from just 1 finger. Most curious of all, the doorway was designed to be closed from inside the tomb, conjuring up images of rites too sacred to be observed. And what did we just say then? We actually said that this was more of a temple, more of a place of something else other than just burial, right? And that is an interesting point. If we go with that with us away from this lecture today, and naturally I've actually have been going on for nearly an hour and 15 minutes now. But if we go away from this lecture today and we think that actually this is so well built, it could just not be for burial, right? Think about that, right? Why do we call it a burial chamber, right? Well, we don't call churches burial chambers, do we? Right? We call churches churches, when in fact burials are within churches, right? So what we might need to do is reappraise what we call these buildings. Do we call them temples? Well, it conjures up like a Jewish temple, right? Okay, or a Hindu temple, right? Okay. But in lots of these places, in lots of these places, there's burials associated with them, right? So what actually are them? Even in houses, even in homes, you've got burials underneath the floor, right? So would you call a house with burial under the floor a burial chamber, or would you call it a house? So I think what we need to do is we need to conjure up a different way of looking at these monuments, and a different way of a sense of that connection. Which when we think about burials, when we think about the sense of burials, and we think about it sort of doesn't connect us well, because in a modern society, we don't like the dead. We stay away from our dead. We don't go to cemeteries. We don't go and see our loved ones buried at cemeteries, right? Some of us do. For example, my parents visit my sister every single Sunday, right? Maybe this is their way of connecting with their loved ones. In the left and the right and in front of us, you got like burials. That's what we do with churches. You know, seeing these sites and understanding them, I think we need to reappraise the name and reappraise the meaning. In some of the Northern Isles enjoy almost 24-hour daylight, where in the winter, the situation is reversed. Days pass when the sun barely skims the horizon and the nights would seem endlessly long. This point in the depth of winter, when the sun begins its slow return to the skies, would have held great significance for their prehistoric people of the north. It represented hope of a renewed fertility and a return to the life-giving warmth of spring. The passageway at Maeshowe was carefully aligned to the southwest, so that once a year, at sunset on the midwinter solstice, the last rays of the setting sun entered through a slit in the door stone. The back wall of the chamber would be lit by an orange beam in a silent theatre of light and symbolic penetration of the dark womb. So this again is where we're sort of starting to think about we're starting to think about that back to the womb thing again, you know. And again, coming away from this today, we could start to think, well, maybe what we are seeing is that these have got multiple uses, multiple meanings, all at different periods and different parts of the British landscape. It is not known how many people's bones were eventually housed in the chamber at Maeshowe. An excavation in 1861 recovered only one piece of human skull. That could have been a Viking piece of human skull. The contents may have been cleared out by Vikings who, in the 1100s, broke in through the roof of the tomb, as I've mentioned. These Norsemen covered the walls in scribblings, deemed to be the best collection of runes anywhere in the world. Some of their messages betray suspicions that the mound once held a rich burial hoard. Others, such as thorny bedded Helgi, are simply timeless. And obviously the ones that are a little bit more explicit than that. When we see this, and when we want to understand this, we're left lacking, right? And I don't think we should be left lacking. I think we should be more like a wonderful Margaret, who's not left lacking. Margaret, are you left lacking when you're looking at this? Are you there, Margaret?
Yeah. I was just looking at Maeshowe before the image before. It's just absolutely stunning.
Yes.
Just the way it's been built. I mean, it's been designed. I just find it unbelievable that it's so old that they could do that then, and it's absolutely beautiful.
And you're using other words like beauty. You're using wonderful, powerful words. Beauty is a powerful word. If you go up to somebody and say they're beautiful, if you're going to say that that's beautiful, that's a powerful word. And you've used a word that sort of encompasses so much more than thinking about ritual and ceremony. You know, using the word ritual and ceremony, right, deprives us of really understanding the power that these monuments actually have. I'm not going to take a break now. I just got to go and do something quickly. So Margaret, tell us a little bit about your thoughts and I'll be back in 30 seconds. Go for it.
Well, it just looks as if it's been, well, you've been there, haven't you, Pete?
Yeah, well, yes. And now the entrance to my house is lined up with another stones, if you like.
Yeah.
And I still believe it's such a point of fertility.
Yeah.
Because the continuance of the group or the species is such a high priority with everybody. So many things are attributed to fertility and the replacement of the species.
Well, why didn't the people back then, when they do, I mean, maybe it was earlier when they did the cave paintings, why didn't they do paintings in the caves of men and women and sexual acts? Why were they just animals, do you think?
The thing is, right, the thing is, that's us thinking now. You just said, why didn't they do that? And it's just like, it's almost as if we want to put our modern perspective on what we're what you know, the past offers us only so much. The past only offers us so much. You can't offer us everything. It's when we look in the Bible, we can't expect for the Bible to portray all of history, right? Yeah, I think there's so, and also they may have been describing things and giving us things in the past that have decayed or gone in wood. There may have been other ways that they did things, you know.
Yeah, but it would have been of primary importance to them back then, wouldn't it? It would have been uppermost in their minds, I would imagine.
Reproduction and life.
Yes.
Yeah. What I am going to do now is I'm actually going to take a break. I've just realised I've really gone over. We are going to take a break now. So I just want to know, is there any questions from anybody? Like Adam, have you got any questions?
Nothing to add, Carl.
Right, okay. I hope we're all getting something out of the journey today. Right, David, anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
Right, Peter.
No, other than what I've already said, but the entrance to my house lined up with something else.
It's a powerful thing. It really is.
It's extremely powerful. That's right. It is lined up with something else.
Yes, and when you think about it, there's a great landscape of hillocks and mounds and other things. So yeah, you are right, Peter. There's actually, and there's another point to be made quickly before we have a break, right? When we look at the landscape today, it's not the same landscape that it was in the past. There's lots of things missing in the past. So when we got A with B, right, there was also C and D in the past. We're only lining up what we're seeing now. They saw so much more in the past than we do today.
When you look at Skara Brae, and then you look at Carnooney, the similarity between the two is amazing, considering the distance they are apart.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with what. The other thing as well is, Peter, right? Maybe there was a holy grove of trees which is no longer with us. So you know what I mean? All these different things.
Yeah.
All these things that are missing and absent within the landscape. So, right, okay, who else? So we are going to take a break in a sec. So anything from you, Anne? And
yeah, just it's interesting that one's looking here at things that are universal, like reproduction and raising children and death. And there are other factors which we see very little of, yet you feel there must have been feasting. I mean, we saw, I think it was in the Saharan wall paintings, we saw people dancing. We don't see much of that, but these buildings, you wonder whether that was all done outside, or whether the buildings were also for, what could they, social rather than religious, or the more important things like life and death. But whether those sort of things must have been going on, one would think, if the human race being what it is.
Can I just chuck a curveball in there, right? When people say, "Oh, stone circles were the church used to say that they were women turned to stone on a Sunday," right? Maybe the stones did actually represent women dancing. In prehistoric times. It's just that we think the church is got the right answer. Do you know what I mean? So it's that sort of play on interpretation that we've got to be very wary of.
Yes, it's so difficult to do, because you can't know, at least until you can get some evidence to know, isn't it? It's difficult.
But even the evidence doesn't talk as well as it should do. So
no.
Right, okay.
I remember the Ring of Stones down in Cornwall, and you would not step inside.
Oh.
Actually, I will. When we come back, I will explain more about that when we come back after the break.
I'll tell you, I remember it distinctly.
Mm-hmm.
I
remember the people were making the rings of grass on the tree in the hedge beyond it.
That's right. I will after the break. I'll explain a little bit more to that. Anyway, thanks for that, Andy. I will. Not Andy, Peter. Andy, anything you'd like to say? Because we're going to have a break.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, you mentioned about the stone slab that covers the floor of the entrance chamber there, or the little passageway, as being previously a standing stone.
Yes.
Where did you get the evidence from that from?
Basically, so are the slabs on the side. They reckon they're cut and they look very similar to the ones at Stennis. It's one of the things that the Orcadian archaeologists do tell you about.
Right. So they just think because they're the same as those, they're assuming that that's what they are.
Yes, I can see where you're going. Basically, because it's basically on a platform with a ditch around the outside. They believe that platform represented something very similar in a smaller way to the Ring of Brodgar and Stennis. Okay. It's the same dimensions as Stennis, which actually at Stennis you do have these stones which are the same length and dimensions of the stones that might have. But Andy, you are right. We're presuming that.
Yeah. It's interesting. No, so the site's been repurposed then. So.
Yeah, I love repurposing in the past.
Yeah,
I do.
The other thing I was thinking about was that we're kind of obsessed with sex, in the 20th century or whatever, or maybe even the last 150 years. It's quite possible, especially when people lived together in the same room, that they weren't obsessed with it, and they still did it, but they didn't think much of it. They just did it without thinking about it and didn't put so much emphasis on it, and that therefore, we always build enclosures to live in, and we feel comfortable and still. And you're right, I've been in teepees that feel extraordinarily still and warm and safe inside. And I don't know whether that is because there's no draft or there's no air moving around because there's only the one entrance, or whether it's because there's some subconscious returning to the womb thing. But it's comfort. It's like mixing up lust with love. It may well be that our liking of chambers and places and safety is not related to sex at all.
Just makes you feel happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also back to that thing with the cage, right? It wasn't a solid, it's just mesh. But because I walked in there, I remember saying to you last year when the roundhouse was being constructed, right? There was just a load of posts in the ground, right? When I went inside, I felt enclosed, even though there was nothing stopping the air, whatever,
Oh, and the paps of Jura, they really do look like breasts. I've seen them. You see them from Tyree very easily. Everyone goes, oh yeah, paps of Jura. That's what it's been called for centuries. You look at them and thinking, oh God, yeah, they do.
But they've got nipples on the top.
Well, they do. Yeah, they've put cairns on the top of them now. I don't how long they've been there. I don't know.
Yeah. All we need is little flags on them. So okay, what we're gonna do, it's 9:24, and we're gonna have a break sort of for like it's 9:25 now. We're gonna have a break for like 15 odd minutes. So and we'll be back. We'll see you then.
Take up.
Put myself some toast on. Do you want me to put another in? Oh, yes, please. I didn't want to disturb you. I don't want any cheese. No, I'm just going to have to do that. I do not want toast. Yes. Well, I know I like it. But not on my It's like a great idea. It does. I think you have to take your eye, don't you? Yes, I sometimes. Do you enjoy your class? Julie, I've just sent my WhatsApp and Julie sent me a message saying what time. So if I tell her any time 1 o'clock onwards, and I think plenty of time in the right. Okay. All right. Well, he keeps happening in his knee. Oh, does he? Yes, he usually stays with me when it's archaeology. That's nice. It's in his nose. Before I was. Just amazing how protected they are.
Some of these things must have been used for, can't you think?
Peanuts. I like the mug, Anne.
All right.
I like your mug.
Yes, is it lovely? My granddaughter bought it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I collect ducks, and they buy me. I get so many little gifts of things to use with ducks on. She found that for me.
Nice one, yeah.
When I was a child in the war, you know, everybody had something to get some food. Well, we had ducks, and it sort of stayed with me. So I had duck eggs when I was a very
we had
small
chickens,
child.
and we also had a couple of ducks. Yes.
Yeah, we had the ducks. So the duck thing has stayed with me.
But we also had 2 piglets.
What did you know? We only had a very tiny little backyard. You see, that there wasn't much room for anything but these ducks. But the Drake had a thing with the cat. I mean, it's funny when you watch animals together, isn't it? Had
a thing with the cat.
With the cat, yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. When the cat went out, the Drake, not the other ducks, but the Drake would rush up to the cat as though he was going to set about her. And I've seen this happen. The cat would sort of walk back with the tail out, and the duck would sort of be and snap his beak. When to just miss her, it's almost a game they played. And it was just like a threat, but it wasn't quite carried out.
They come across very arrogant cats, don't they?
Oh, yes. You don't own a cat. The cat owns you.
That's right.
If it fancies you, that is.
But the cats are really very useful. If it's somewhere, if you're not very comfortable in the room, look where the cat is and go and pinch the cat's place.
Yeah.
They sort of know where the best place is, where it's the warmest or the softest or something.
During the war, it wasn't a good time, but I don't know. So, but we lived out in the country, so we weren't as badly affected as people living in cities and things. We had our own chickens, so we had plenty of eggs and things like that. But,
was there a lot of camaraderie between people back then, or were you two?
Oh yes, really? Absolutely.
Yeah.
The local farmer, I mean, they would have to register any young their livestock had. So when a pig had something like a dozen piglets, he would register 10 of them and farm 2 out to people like us. And we'd take the 2 piglets and feed them up on the scraps from a table and everything until they were big enough to butcher.
I lived because I lived in the middle of Birmingham, you know, a much less suitable place for the war. But we had these, along all the roads, they had these pig bins that they were like a dustbin.
Yeah.
And you took all your potato peelings and your stale bread or whatever, and they fed the pigs on those.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. That's they did. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was evacuated out because Birmingham was pretty dangerous, you know, I was evacuated out with my mother because I was only very tiny at the beginning of the war.
Well, I was an evacuee.
Fun. Yeah, an evacuee. But as I say, I was only 2 when the war started, and I was only 3 when I was going to be evacuated. They evacuated very small children like that together with the mother. So, so I went with her. When my father was travelling around anyway, he was all over he was in one of these reserved occupations, and he was setting up telephone connections. Evidently the government was moving around and he was having to put the switchboards in, you know, for them to have communication from wherever they were going to. So he was travelling all over the place before the government moved.
Oh, wow.
And my dad was in civil defence, so in London, and they both worked in London. And Mum had 4 kids, and so the 2 youngest, me and my other brother, we were evacuated down to Cornwall to live with her family. I went to live with my mum's sister, my aunt.
My sister was evacuated on her
14.
own. Yeah, my sister was evacuated. The whole school, her school, moved to Hinckley.
Oh,
and
right.
And all the kids were sort of fostered out round the area. So she was evacuated because she was 10 years older than me, so more suitable age to that secondary school age.
But I was only 2 like yourself.
And I remember in this town, I don't know if you had it round you, because a lot of bombing went on, and a lot of these. And what's the name of the plant? It's pink, and it's I forgot the name of it, but it grew over all the bomb shelters. And it also made it sort of look pretty, as though this nature was trying to do something to make the big holes in the ground look better.
It's amazing to think that all that mayhem happened in your lifetime, isn't it? Such a long time ago.
Yes. Well, I was 2 when it started.
Yeah.
So I know, but I do remember parts of it. I remember we had a shelter in the garden, and I must have come back after this evacuation. Maybe it got that it wasn't so dangerous or something. We came back, and I remember going out with the tin hats on in the garden when there were planes going over, and we got the shelter to go. But Dad could sort of he explained to me that you could hear different sounds. The German aeroplanes had a different sound than the British ones. Yeah. So he'd say, that's one of ours, and we'd be all right. It was one of theirs. We'd go and get in the shelter. It was,
I think it's amazing how the city's recovered so quickly afterwards, after being, the Blitz in London, and they just rebuilt things so quickly, didn't they? Well, I'm presuming they did.
It was amazing. It was amazing, the recovery and how the whole lot of it. I think, I'm just staggered that after only 3 years after the end of the war, no, it's a bit long, that 5 years, they got the National Health Service up and running out of nothing. It's just amazing what they achieved at that period of time.
And all those prefabs that they put up.
That's right. And look how long they were only supposed to be for a short time, and they were there for ages, weren't they?
I remember that there's still some left now. I remember them when I was in my teens. They still had quite a lot where I lived. And
they lasted a long time. They thought they were only supposed to be very temporary, but I'm surprised that we don't think about something like that now when you see all the shortage of housing. I think they could. I went to an exhibition in where is it? Stanford in Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
And somebody designed these. They were all like plastic model houses, and quite small, couple of rooms in them. They designed them for Africa for easy access and that. But they were small, but at least they would have been something you could do quickly, and so that people had somewhere decent to live.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They don't seem to. They get these ideas and don't seem to implement them all. I don't know why they don't choose them sometimes.
All about planning permissions, isn't it?
Probably,
rules and regulations.
You see, there's a stairwell on sale in London for £20,000.
Oh, a stairwell?
Yeah.
What, for somebody to live in?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know the details, but the house has a separate door with a separate set of stairs.
Oh my God.
Stairs. So they're selling one of those stairwell.
They spend a fortune, It's terrible. It's dreadful, the housing situation, isn't it?
I say, we lived way out in the country, but we lived also on a hill. And from my bedroom window, I could see the flashes of light as the bombs fell on Falmouth.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Did you feel frightened?
Well, no, because we were so far away from it.
Yeah.
When we went into town, and we'd get the bus and go into Falmouth, go shopping. I remember getting off the bus, and there's this enormous church on fire because it had been hit by an incendiary bomb.
Yeah. My mum and dad used to, because a child, and I had very strict instructions never to pick anything up off the ground, however nice it looks. If it looks like a sweet or a toy, this was really hammered in. These things were being dropped and could be dangerous. So, yeah, all these
Just
sort of
after the
lessons that
war,
you'd never need today. Pardon?
Just after the war, as a young boy,
yeah,
I had 200 rounds of an American 303 ammunition, which I picked up off a dump.
Oh my God!
It'd been thrown away by them, and I picked it up, and I had them.
Yeah.
But I couldn't let anybody know I had them because they'd be taken off me. But I used to pull the bullets out and get the gunpowder out.
I bet that was a real treasure to you as a boy, wasn't it?
It was.
Not really exciting to have. Yeah.
Oh, the things we did.
And I remember the rations.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
That went
2
on
ounces of butter and 1 egg a week.
Yeah, I can remember.
And a quarter of sweets. Those were
4
important.
points for a quarter of sweets.
Yeah.
4 points for a quarter of sweets.
That lasted a long time, well into the 50s, didn't it?
51, I think it finished.
Yeah. Blimey.
Yeah.
It'd be a different kind of war now, for sure, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sadly, it certainly would, yes.
But they still find unexploded bombs, don't they, every now and then?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think those mines are awful.
Yeah.
And
the cluster bombs the cluster bombs that are supposed to be illegal, but people are using them.
They're just evil. Wow.
Well, everything's evil. I really think, you get all these films about gangs who trade in guns and things, they're racketeers and that. I think nations who do it are just as bad because they're equally spreading death. And, we should really get some kind of agreements going not to be making all this stuff.
Oh, don't get us going.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we're one of the worst for doing that.
We are.
As a nation.
Yes,
we are.
We get ordnance washing up on the, not so much the beach here, but Morecambe Bay quite regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is all World War II stuff that they dumped in the sea to get rid of and didn't quite dump it far enough away.
But these German ones?
No, it's all surplus British stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know the German planes sometimes offloaded spare bombs on the way back, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
There was a house at Grange that was in ruins, and certainly well into the 1970s, that had been bombed.
Yeah.
They said that was.
I remember a German plane being shot down. The pilot parachuted out, and the Home Guard was called out to capture him. I think there was 8 of them that surrounded him with their guns prone, ready to shoot at him.
Mm.
And he surrendered.
Difficult one.
Yeah.
Especially if your house has just been blown up with your family in.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So can you hear me now, folks?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's that? Was that somebody? I heard somebody say, "Can I hear you?" Yeah.
Just a bad echo. Yeah.
Well, the weirdest thing now is I can't make this up, right? I've had to try and catch the sheep that is pulling a sledge.
Oh, really?
I gotta show you an image of it. One of the sheep has got tangled up in the sledges, right? And it's actually pulling a sledge across the field.
Oh
dear.
I can't make it up. Anyway, so
trading it for Christmas.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you make a bomb.
So back to where we were. So about this experience, about the wonderful site of Mice Howe, and we talk about a lot about the female body and thinking about the sense of the womb, and thinking about the whole cycle of life. And you know, there's a site, another site we're going to actually look at now, which is a site known as Loch Crew. And Loch Crew itself is another mound that's quite impressive in Ireland. And this interesting site of Loch Crew in County Meath in Ireland is another site that you may not have come across. It's a Neolithic passage tomb. It was strangely enough, it's the largest in Ireland. Obviously, you think about that, we think that it's Newgrange, but this is the largest in Ireland. And interestingly enough, it was actually discovered in the 1860s. So one of the things that we're sort of opening up on is that when we look at this landscape, bits of the landscape are still being discovered. This monument that we're seeing in front of us, like many, is on a hilltop. Others don't need to be on hilltops. And think about this now, that when we think about these types of monuments, it's almost as if the Neolithic people were taking their dead back into the womb of Mother Earth. And if we think of it that way, that we're putting the bones into the womb for the bones to be revived, that's a very, very interesting concept. So this is also known as White Mound, and it's known as karl-james, and it's known as the White Mound because there's lots of brilliant quartz there, and there's lots of other monuments like this in County Meath. And this does not dictate the same experience that we've actually seen at Maes Howe. It's got a short passageway. It's got a cruciform form involved with it. There's more than just this one monument at this landscape in County Meath. One of the things that we do have is carvings in one of these tombs. There's actually 30 of them altogether. And like many of these tombs in Ireland, these passage graves, these tombs, have got art associated with them. Art associated with them, which is displayed. Art associated with them, which is covered up. And when we're talking about covered up, you get carvings on some stones and actually facing into the mound, then actually facing out into the passage. So let's look at a little bit of one of those examples. There you go. So you can see with this that they've made a great deal of effort to incise on this stone over various different periods in time. So lots, we mentioned this earlier on, before we had the break. And when we had the break, Margaret was talking about, Anne was talking about, Anne it was this time. She was talking about some things that we'd see in the past and other things that we don't see in the past. But in many ways, if you're using ochre painting in some of these monuments, then the incised stone does not give you fully what they were trying to tell us. And we look at the past, and I'm very much reminded of lots of the writers that write about the past. You know, when people talk about the various goddesses, and they talk about the maidens and the gods and the goddesses and the mother and the kings and the hags and all these other things, how much of that is based on oral history, or how much of that is based on what we assume? Adam will know full well when we look at the facts, fictions, the legends, and the myths associated with King Arthur. How much of it is actually based on truth? Some of it is, but it's trying to work out the truth from what historians are trying to tell us. So what, in many ways, what we've got to do is go back to these sites, go back to these monuments, and try to read in the archaeology what is exactly there. And what we've got, some of the stone is rather interesting. And I'm going to show you another little bit of an interesting stone, which is within this weird landscape of monuments with these carvings. We're not going to look and analyze these carvings at all. This is supposed to be a sort of bit of a backdrop. And there's something else I actually want to show you. The cross on this next stone is not really relevant to prehistory, but one thing that curiously does come up are seats. This is at Loch Crew again. This is known as the Hag's Chair. And in some ways, what we do see is stones carved into seats, or stones carved into monuments that may have been verifiably for one thing, and in future generations we've interpreted them as something else. Obviously the ancient cross there is much later, but then again, we don't just see monuments in the sense of standing stones and monuments in the sense of chambers within the landscape. We can see stones that have been equally carved and equally associated with the backdrop of Neolithic prehistory. Now, I did mention that we'd have something to do with Newgrange today. We're going to show you a stone at Newgrange that is undoubtedly one of the finest decorated stones to be found in anywhere in Ireland, if not in Great Britain. And there we go. There's Newgrange, and there it is. That's strange enough at the entrance of the Newgrange chamber. And not to say much more about Newgrange, other than this, these spirals. We get this sense of spirals, and we go back to the subject matter. We go back to the womb. We go back to Mother Earth. We go back to the spiral and recycling of life. Now, you could have seen some of these images today, and you could have thought, right, is what we're seeing what Karl is maybe mentioning? Is this something to do with Mother Earth, or is this also to do with what Karl is also mentioning? It could be to do with something else. But one thing that when we get spirals, and we get this endless spiral, as Peter would say, the Celtic knot.
Yeah, never ending. Yeah,
never ending, the never ending circle, right? And a never ending circle of life. It's interesting. It's interesting to know that the embodiment of our ancestors is that they had a sense of eternity. They had a sense of ever recycling, rebirth, death, rebirth, death. And it's interesting, going back to, again, Tim Ingold and following the line is endless, because there is no end to those lines. It's just a never-ending circle. We look at another stone next, and again, these are little pot shots. These are little windows that I'm doing today, just giving you a little bit more, right? And I know it's getting a bit late, but let's just carry on a little bit more, right? A Newgrange, and we there it is. We can see that again. And next, we're going to look at Campster Calms. Now, you know, maybe me and Peter could have seen this when we went on a little bus ride. We didn't see this, but but this wasn't too far away from the route that we took, Peter, when we went to the ferry.
Yeah.
In the far northeast of the Scottish mainland, a dead straight road cuts unfenced through a land of high heather, moors and grazing sheep past the grey cairns of Hampster. Once standing as 3 separate stone cairns, 2 adjacent mounds were merged at some stage into one enormous long cairn. Now that's interesting. That's interesting in itself. Mounds are merged into one, right? Have we ever seen that before? Not really. We usually think of a mound and there's something going on, but merging mounds. Now crows hover ragged and motionless in the wind over the undulating, conjoined massive stones whose height tails off to the south, like the outline of a reclining figure. Yes, a reclining figure. But this is woven. Is this an invented sense of the landscape? These superb cairns made more magnificent by their bleak location. Bleak location today, it wasn't so bleak in the past. Always remember that. Are reached by wooden walkboards across a more sodden even in the height of summer and flecked with a host of tufted heads of cotton grass. You can imagine that today, can't you? The lowest stone courses of the long cairn and its flanking horns with the sense of this neatly laid flagstones, as though its builders tired of precision. So it started off really good, right? And then they said, right, sod it, we'll just pile it on, right? Then again, I got to be honest with you, piling a load of stones on top of stones is not easy either. So that's incorrect. You know, we're talking about the nice coursing and a sense of jaggedness with the stones above. But then again, that's what you're going to do anyway. You know, it's just pile it up. So when we talk about these conjoined chambers, another site that I'm sure none of us would have been to. I've not been to this, even though we were like a mile away from it. Originally topped by fine cobbled roofs, these vaults are like miniature dome cathedrals indeed. At the height of one chamber is vast, smooth stone like a 2-dimensional church altar. You can see where it's piled up there. Perhaps when we look at this, we can sort of have a sense of some eerie shaped landscape where we've got these actually joined together. It's like very odd that these like 3 become 2 and then become 1, that it's all joined together. This is playing out in some kind of demonstration of what people in the past wanted to tell us. When ancient people buried their dead in these earthen womb-like spaces, they inextricably bonded with their ancestors to go back into the earth and to rise again. The spirits of the dead inhabited the interface between the tangible world of the living and that of the precarious forces of nature. We started off with that. I was talking about the precarious nature of the interwoven landscape that we respected in the past, but now we dominate today. We have a completely different relationship with the landscape today than we did in the past. Today, we use and abuse the landscape as we free will, the Anthropocene period. In the past, the landscape was as much as us as we were as much of it, because as in life, as in death, we are part of the landscape. That's what we understood in the past. And the eternity was, in fact, that was eternity. That resonance, the resonance of light and darkness within these monuments, the resonance of the alive outside these monuments, to be alive inside, to be dead inside as we are outside. We've got yin and yang, complete rocking around contradiction all the way. But isn't life today a massive contradiction? It really very much is. So the living tombs were built as a sensory theatre in which symbolism, the pungent earthy smells of the dampness inside, merge with the intoxicating rhythms of resonation, the sound to such sensory overload that we could only wish to believe what was going on inside these monuments. Do you know, I used to listen to this series in the Now Then it was called. Yeah, Now Then, I've remembered it. I've been trying to think of it for once. There was a children's program called Now Then when I was a child, right? And I wrote to be on it one day. Unfortunately, it came to the end of the series, so I never got on it. But Now Then, I remember they used to play musical instruments in these, and it was really eerie. And yeah, the expectation and awe, as Margaret has mentioned, cannot be dismissed. So these early farmers had a sense of adherence in some of our minds of ceremony. One of the things that Anne said before the break, and I probably rushed it a bit too much, she basically mentioned about this sense of ceremony, feasting, and so on. My usual reaction is that these people had very little time for mass feasting, right? But I think what Anne was saying, there must have been some time that they must have been able to connect. And within these landscapes and monuments, they were able to connect because they were all around them. And you've come across people who are obsessed with their job and they don't have any spare time. There were obviously other people who may have been disabled. There may have been other people with children who could have at least sat down and emerged some connection with having some sense of ceremony, if you want to call it that, or just sitting in there and taking the vibes as somebody plays a musical instrument. And hopefully that's what you were saying.
Yes, I was. There would have been some sort of gathering and enjoying something together sometimes.
And I like what you've done there, because you're sort of playing my game, but you're playing your game. And I'm thinking that you're very right in what you're saying, because at night these people could have gathered together, and whether it was dark outside or dark inside, with a torch or with a candle, with a vertebra, with some oil, you could have burnt this, and you're felt secure and nice inside these monuments, right? They may have taken some light food with them. They may not have needed food. They may have drunk in them. But this is a point that I'm reminded that Peter mentioned earlier on. And I'm very wary of time, but I'll probably go on for 10 more minutes and then we'll call it a day. Right. We could come back to this maybe next week. But there's a few images I really want to show you before we finish. Basically, Peter mentioned earlier on about me. Some of these monuments, I will not go inside. Stand in stone circles. Most of them I won't go inside. Right, I need to be invited in. Right, and I want to go. I don't want to go too far into my faith, but mine is not a normal faith, and there's a few people. There's a very small number of us who follow it. Right, and I don't usually disclose what it is. But when I went to Stonehenge this one time, right, I had to ask a friend to invite me into the central circle of Stonehenge. I would not go inside it. So I went inside and I left, right? And it's a sense of deep respect for these monuments. It's a sense that I haven't, if you noticed, I didn't actually go into the center of Castlerig. I would not do it, even with you guys. You noticed that I didn't go in. That may give you some answers, but anyway, let's carry on. So we think about we again, there it is again, and when we want to see this, and we want to see the landscape, and we want to see fertility, the female form, you could argue that as you're ploughing in a field, the plough could represent the male and the field representing the female, the fertility of the soil, the planting of the seed, and that interplay. which could roughly be seen throughout history. This is known as the Clava Khan. And there's the Clava Khan, very near Inverness. Another site we could have visited, Pete. This is the Clava Khan. And this itself is one of those monuments that is open. It's almost as if it doesn't need any kind of roof on it. And you do see these in lots of areas. You see these sort of spaces where you've almost got a passageway and you've got a chamber. Sometimes I interpret these types of monuments never needing a roof. Maybe it was enclosed, maybe it had a roof on it, right? But if you want to think of this being distinctively womb-shaped, right, then it's fine for you to think that. It's fine for you to want this to be in your mind's eye what you think it is, right? The next thing we're going to do now, I know we're going through these quite rapidly, right? And we're playing through these quite quick. But I'm going to chuck in a curveball, right? So we've done very much these types of monuments, right? I'm going to chuck in a curveball, right? And the curveball, right, is here. Now, this site is known as Grimes Graves in Norfolk. And Pete, you've been here with me, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Grimes Graves in Norfolk. You can go underground here in industrial flint extraction process that was deeply imbued with sexual ritual. Was it or was it not? Now, what we find down underground, right? Interesting enough, underground within the mining system. So they're mining underground and they're finding flint nodules, and there's flint there, right? So mining all this just to get to that flint there, right? And down underground, they found 60 chalk balls, small enough to sit in the palm of a hand, were recovered from this landscape, right? Chalk carved phalluses within this underground domain. Now, the Neolithic flint mines at Grimes Graves lie in the heart of the Norfolk chalkland. And this landscape itself is very much flowing, is very much flowing throughout the history of the landscape of Norfolk. So the mines themselves date back to about 5,000 years ago. And this was originally excavated by a certain Canon William Greenwell in 1868. And when he was excavating, he was very surprised to find the remains of these carved stone balls and chalk phalluses, antler picks, and a variety of other evidence that he felt represented some kind of sexualization of the mining process. Whether that is true or not, the activities to create the mining here would have been incredible. And having some sense of coming from the earth and going back to the earth is very important. And by the way, they found 1 or 2 sets of human remains throughout this complex, but not many, right? This was not a burial site, but they could have easily buried their loved ones down them. Right, just a few more minutes now, and we're going to call it a day. So these are actually steps leading to a site on Orkney called Minehow. There's these steps that go down into the ground, into a box cut into the rock underground. We don't really understand it at all. But there's one image that I wanted Pete to see today, right? And Pete, this is a red herring. We've gone to Minehow. But Pete, this is a red herring, and don't jump. This is not in Cornwall, right? But that is. This itself is actually at a type known as Culsh in Aberdeen. Now, this is near a modern road, right? And it's that one. It's like an underground. It's an underground complex underground. Well, underground complex underground. Yeah, that goes without saying. Of course, it's an underground complex underground. But this itself is in Aberdeen, right? And then you flow to this underground complex of fugus in Cornwall. And this is Carnyenny. Pete's been there with me, and lots of people say that you know, we don't really understand what these are. What are they? They go to little chambers underground. We don't really understand what's going on. Their purpose, was it ceremony? You know, there's lots of these. There's about 20 of these in Cornwall. And underground chamber, that's what these fuggy holes mean. And the one that this one in Aberdeen is referred to, that underneath there are actually cut marks were found carved into the walls, possible symbols of female sexuality. Underground, again, Mother Earth, underground, creating this at Culsh in Aberdeen and this in Carnyenny in Cornwall would have taken a massive sense of effort. And Pete, where is this quickly?
That one.
You've been there, Pete.
Yes, I know. I've been there, seen it. It's
where's the one?
Gosh.
It's the one with the bats.
One with the bats. Oh.
Come on.
I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry.
Haligi.
Okay. Yeah.
This is Haligi. And again,
I've been with so many of these with you.
You don't know which is which. But arguably and finally now today, arguably the most impressive of all the Cornish fogies is Haligi. In a shady woodland, 12 miles east of Penzance, a key-shaped entrance leads into a labyrinth maze of underground tunnels and chambers. Although Victorians reconstructed the entrance, the fogu itself dates back to centuries before the arrival of the Romans, and the expression of what this is about is still a theory. But a final note back to this image, and a final note back to this, right? Back to Culsh, which is a site in Aberdeen. We think about this, and we think about the tunnels, we think about the rich dark earth, we think about a sense of an act of ceremony, an act of closure, a rite of passage, cults. We think about all these other things. The answer to what this landscape means is up to you. And what I've done today is give you a world of prehistory, and hopefully you can interpret it yourself. If some of you want to believe this is about sexuality, if some of you want to believe the sensual side, this and that, it's up to you. And there is one of the cut marks. On that note, we're going to call it a day. Let's see if there's any questions. And we're gonna sign off now. Stop share. And let's see what we've got. Right, everybody's still with us, and what I'm going to do, I know Dave's going to want to make himself a cup of tea, so I'm going to ask Dave first. Is there any questions?
Well, thank you. Very interesting.
I really appreciate you joining us this late, David, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay. Good night, all.
Bye.
David. Thank you very
David.
much. Thank you very much, David. Appreciate that. Appreciate you joining us. Peter.
Well, you've said virtually everything, and like I say, I respect you for what you said about your faith and not going into these circles without invitation, and I certainly respect you for that.
Thank you. It's something that I've kept with for a very long time, and one last thing I would say about that is that Oh God, somebody said something earlier on. I can't remember what it was. It might be Margaret. I'm not sure. I'm trying to bend this into it. When I went to Cyprus when I was a child, it was 19. When I wasn't a child, I was 14. I went to Paphos by myself, the Tomb of the Kings, and I was 14. And I went into one burial chamber. Right, I couldn't get out.
Yeah.
I just went into a burial chamber. The door was in front of me. I couldn't get out. And then as I made my way out, right, I can remember seeing there was a body on the left of a dog, right, a skeletal remains of a dog on the left, and I thought, I can't get out of here. So I picked up some earth and chucked it back in, and I felt okay. So from that moment onwards, every burial chamber I went in, I had to chuck dirt in, because I'd gone into this burial chamber, right, and I felt I had invaded the privacy of the burial chamber, and I needed to put something back. So every single burial chamber we went in, then I chucked something back in, and I felt okay. But those are burial chambers. I don't know if it's sort of into that inkling with the stone circle.
Yep.
Right. So who have we done? We've done Peter. We've done Margaret. Have we?
No. You remember going back to New Grange, which I know you're not too keen on, but the stone carvings outside.
Yeah.
Look at this by Van Gogh. Can you see it?
Oh yeah, that one. What's that one called again? It's like the
Storm
spirals.
Starry Night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Starry Night.
Starry night.
And it looks looks like the spirals on those stones.
There's another one with storm clouds over a cornfield with like that as well.
Yeah, he always does these swirly.
So do the Japanese in woodcuts. So but they're if you'd seen those curvy whirly things and it was Japanese, it would be waves.
Yeah, I thought it could be wind. It could be waves clouds, and wind, and as I say, the environment it could represent as well, couldn't it?
Yeah.
The environment, sensory, the outside of that, it's just. Do you know when when I was talking about I do my YouTube thing to communicate with people and whatever, and then you write books to communicate, and then it's the same as these monuments. These people are not communicating with us; they're communicating with something. So when I'm doing my work, I'm communicating with I don't know who, right? But sometimes you get a response back, and these people weren't always expecting something back. They just did it. And I think when we look at the past, we need to see that they did things, and we overanalyze it. And mate, we've done a lot today. We haven't overanalyzed things. Do you notice we didn't sort of, what does that spiral mean? That whatever. We just did this. Like, we're giving you information. Anne's going to say it was an overload today, but thanks, Anne. It's meant to be.
No, I enjoyed it.
Go on, Anne.
Something that Margaret said about the mounds being designed, and when you look at the construction of them inside, these people were probably architects and engineers to be able to construct them as well as that. Yeah. The other thing I was wanting to ask you about this, because you find the stone circles, which seem to be all over the place, and these mounds that are, in various countries and similar, whether change happened much more slowly that we see this. There were so many similar, they must have had some connection in time, but whether change happened much more slowly because there's so many of them and spread out.
Right, okay. Do you know what?
I don't know, idea. I just...
No, hang on. Do you know what? You said something without you said something without saying it there, without knowing it, right? But the first thing you said about architects and stuff. These people were thinkers, right? Yeah, they were able to think outside the box, right? That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that you mentioned about change, right? We think. Right, I've actually done this, and I apologise, and maybe I'm wrong. I've given lots of archaeologists do it, but I'm going to own this one. I give the impression that, you know, there's whole gaps of time which nothing happens, right? There are whole gaps of time that things have happened and we've not really understood what's happened, right? These people had long and complicated lives as much as we do, right? They're massively varied. There's a massive, because we don't have tower blocks and supermarkets and roads and all these other things, right? Doesn't mean to say they didn't have a lot going on, which they did. They had so much going on that in many ways we don't have the evidence for it. So, for example, we get massive monuments. We can't find the settlements, right? But they must have had settlements. They must have lived somewhere. They must have fed themselves. We've not necessarily got all the evidence there. And this thing about connection and spirals, well, the human mind, if you noticed it, the first thing that you doodle on a piece of paper is a spiral. We do it today. Nothing's changed. It's what the human mind does. And whoever said earlier on that it's things that we think about, is ingrained DNA, right? This is all ingrained DNA. And it's as simple as that. Don't overcomplicate it. Does that get somewhere what you were talking about, Anne?
Yeah. Yes. Good. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Right. So who have we got left now? We've got Adam and Mr. Crisps. Go on, Andy. Sorry, that was really bad. I just really sorry.
No, it's fine.
Go on, Andy.
Better than socks.
Yeah. Pringle socks.
Yeah, the Pringle knitwear was the only other one before the crisps popped out. No, I just think it's frustrating, isn't it, to think that there probably was a time when people understood exactly what it was all about without having to be told, because that was the language that they understood, you know. And I don't mean verbal or literal, but sadly we don't at the moment. So.
Or do we need to? Because it is too complicated.
We always need to know. That's why we study archaeology.
Would be good to know.
But the thing is, right? The thing is, what springs to mind, right, is that can you explain to me how I'm able to talk to you in real time in a different part of the country? How does that work, right? And I don't think anyone can actually really give me an answer, right? There's probably one or two people on the planet who do know, who can give me a precise answer, right? Who can actually put that, right? If the past was as incredibly complicated as we think it is, then it's going to be very difficult. If I can't understand modern technology, right?
Yeah.
How did they understand the technology themselves?
Because it was a lot simpler.
No, that's a bad word. No,
I wouldn't agree with that at all.
No,
I don't agree with that at all.
I think we assume it's in our arrogance that it's simpler.
Well, because we know it. When they didn't know it, it would have been very hard to find, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and we don't know what they built them for. So
no.
But that they learned the physics associated with it.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Engineering. I had to become into that. They didn't have to be able to construct them.
That's right. They learned it as they did.
Yeah.
What we've done. I've created a dichotomy. I said it's more simpler than we think, and Margaret's grabbed that, and then me and Andy have come back at Margaret, and what me and Andy are trying to say is that this was a hell of a lot more incredibly complicated than we can ever dream of, and the sense of simplicity was maybe their way of their open door. Was that they had to do these things and they had to get on with it, right? That's what I'm trying to say by simplicity, not getting out of it. They had to get on with it. They had to get on with their lives. We in our lives, we don't always get on with our lives. We drag our lives and we don't always achieve what we need to, right? They either had to achieve what they needed to or they would never get done.
Also, things that we know always seem easy. What we don't know is difficult, for us to treat, whatever it is.
Maybe those spirals and markings are all the doodles of the people who are thinking, oh, I really should get on with this building.
But as I said, this stuff looks incredibly. And when you think they didn't have all the machinery that we had, it must have been incredibly difficult to do it.
Well, I was talking to somebody the other day about the building of those great big massive circles and the Avebury stones and everything. And they said, well, it seems enormous to us, but these were extremely hardworking people. They had to get their own food, they had to get their own water, they had to do everything themselves. So to them, it wouldn't have been such a mammoth task as it would be to us now, in a way.
On the other hand, they may not have been doing a 40-hour week. I mean, it depends how long how long they chose or organised their life. They might have done things at a much slower pace than we need to do it yesterday, don't we? Most of the things we're doing. That might have been different.
Well, actually, I'm going to turn that around. Maybe their lives was so compacted, right? So their life experience was a lot more expansive than ours. The example is okay then, right? I'll tell you about my average week, right? I've got a column to do for the local newspaper. I've got all my TikToky things and my YouTube stuff, which I've got to do now, right? I've got the studio in Barry. I've got my parents. I've got the 3 classes I teach. I've got my children. I've got building a roundhouse. I've got relationships. I've got animals. I'm a woodland trust. I've got my acting. I've got my writing, and a few other things I do. Right, most people couldn't handle that in an average month, and that's what I do every single week. Right. The point is that they may have had lives that were 40, 50 years old, right? And that was max, right? But the fact of the matter is they may have filled it with so much. And maybe I disagree with Andy saying that they filled it with less. But Andy's right also in what he's saying. They didn't need to fill it with as much. They could only fill in the hours that they could do by the restrictions that they had. So there's always a dichotomy. Back to what we said, Andy, some people were hunter-gatherers, others weren't. And that's how we've got to look at history.
Yeah, totally agree. We're all different.
Adam, go on. So we're all different. Well, I'm not. Adam's not different. Go on, Adam. Adam, what you need is you need a good bit of archaeology. Yes. So I've worked out where the archaeological excavation is. I've actually got to build a building around the archaeological excavation, ready for the excavation. But that's something else. Right, Adam. Anything you would like to say this week?
Nothing to add to that, but I've got to say that it's very thought-provoking. I loved it.
Good. And I got to be honest with you, 10:27, flipping it. I tell you what, we'll give it 3 more minutes, guys, and this will be a record, right? Quickly, Margaret, Anne, Peter, Andy, Adam, anything else you'd like to say?
No.
When you build sandcastles on the beach, do you build the castle first or the moat?
The sandcastle, love. What about you?
Do you? Yeah. Well, isn't that how they did Avebury, perhaps?
Hang on, you've caught me out. You've got the sand. Ooh. Hang on, you caught me out. The sandcastle has to be created from something, so it's got to be created from the moat.
Well,
but then again,
I do sandcastles, I get it from the bit of sand that's wet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's nice and firm.
Technology.
Take it further in so that the sea isn't going to wash it away. So I build the castle first, and then I do the moat.
Is this a genetic understanding of building here? You see.
Hang on a minute. She's just caught me out, and how she's caught me out is something I should know better not to be caught out. The Romans built their embankments using turfs from the field, not the earth from the ditch. Their turf banks has been proven over and over again. To build a fort, you cut turfs in a field, you build the bank first, and then you dig the ditch. You are very right, young lady. And yes, so therefore, hang on, the point is, you've nailed it. Avebury, the ditch, we had this problem last week, didn't we? I was doing it from the other way. I was saying the ditch was more important than anything, right? And I was struggling with there seemed to be more the chalk and the depth of the ditch than was required from building the bank. So where did all the excess chalk go? So if we do it your way, you devious devil, right? Yeah, and also if you build a bank out of turf, it gives stability for the ditch that you're digging down below.
Yeah.
You evil woman.
Yeah, no, you bear in mind the depth and size of that ditch at Avebury. That's an awful lot of soil or chalk to get rid of because you've already got a bank.
Silbury Hill.
Yeah, exactly.
Silbury Hill.
Yeah.
We've sorted it.
Oh my God, you Adam, you can write a scientific paper on that and you've got it from
PhD instant.
Bang.
I got it from playing on the beach with my granddaughter.
I don't think you could put that in though. You might get into trouble with that. Yeah.
No. It's just like, as I put in my dissertation, right? I was describing landscapes and I said, this is the Lebensraum of the Neolithic period. And my lecturer said, I don't think you should use the word Lebensraum, right? I think most of you know what Lebensraum means. It's the word for living space for Nazi Germany. I don't think you should use that, but yeah, stay away from the sandcastles, love. Don't mention that. Just think it some other way. Good. Oh God! On that note, it was very exciting tonight. I think we've made up for absolutely everything. I don't know what we've made up for, but as a record, this lecture did sort of start at 7:30. I didn't get going until 7:45. I've managed to do 2 hours, and we had a break of 20 minutes. 2 hours and about 10 minutes, 15 minutes lecturing. So I think that's good value.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting.
You're not getting any more money for it.
No,
and I loved all the illustrations. I thought the illustrations, the pictures were really super today.
Oh, not that they're ever super. Yeah, sorry, they always are. Yeah. So next week we got something different next week. I managed to get to the end of that, so that's good. So, so what we're going to do, we're going to call that a day. So I've really appreciated everybody tonight. I'll see you tomorrow, Peter. Appreciated you, Andy, and your crisps. Adam and his beard. Anne and Margaret, they're provoking. Peter and his love and boy sheep. Other than that, Peter, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. If nobody else has got anything else to say, Nostar, Margaret, and Peter, Andy, and Adam. And Nostar means good night in Welsh.
Yeah.
Night.
Thank you. Good night, all. Thanks, Carl.
As well.
My pleasure. Take care. That was good. Liked it.
You know, Nostar in Cornish as well.
Well, they got to be. Damn, they in Cornish people. Yeah. Don't forget to like and subscribe tonight. And I tell you what, it's so weird what's happened with my YouTube today. Yeah, 1,836 views in the last 48 hours. The video I put on today, question of the day, where is this round wall? 15 views. Yesterday's question of the day, what is this medieval stone object? 1,347 views. YouTube, what is going on? Right, hoping that this video will get traction overnight. Anyway, this has been really good. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to look at that there. I've got to get oh God, I've got to get a sledge from under a sheep. Can't make it up. I wish I had the phone. Weird. A sheep with a sledge. Right. Oh, I'll film it now. What a weird thing. Anyway, I've got to go. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to look in the chat box. Nothing in the chat box on 3, 2, 1. We're going to close the chat box on 1, 2, 3.